if you were to look at challenges in managing children's behavior, I think that frame of reference itself is actually the problem, because if we consider that it's the role of the adults to manage how children behave, it's going to result in a power struggle, especially when you have like a teacher-student ratio of 1 to 25, 1 to 35, whatever it is. Curiosity is one of the most powerful drivers for any sort of learning. I would want for our relationship with our child to be that when he messes up like that, and I'm sure he will, that he will choose to talk to us about it rather than somebody else. Key thing is that we need to demonstrate to children that we respect them, and then they will follow our example and respect us.
Thank you, Sifaan, for joining us today on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. So, Sifaan, I know that you are an educationist, and we have talked many a times privately on the CWW Kannangara's perception of the free education. How do you feel? Is our education really free?
Right, so I think there's a little bit of something lost in translation, so to speak. So obviously when Dr. Kannangara was doing this report, they were working in English and they were talking of free education. And at that time, the key thing was about making it free of cost so that anybody could afford education, could access education regardless of whether the family had money or not. Because at that time, that was a big issue. If you had money, you could get educated. If you didn't, then you didn't have much opportunity. So it was kind of really groundbreaking at that time to give not only school but also university education free of charge. And if it's free of charge, you would normally translate it into Sinhala as nomile. Right? If you're giving away something for free, you would say nomile. But for some reason, this was translated as Nidas Adhyapane, which maybe isn't necessarily incorrect, because there were lots of aspects of freedom in that recommendation as well. So freedom for the student in terms of not being restricted, not being constrained by a very rigid syllabus, as well as freedom for the teacher and the school also to experiment, try different things, and not be like one standardized product across the entire country. But a lot of those freedoms have been lost. So I think it would be not reasonable to call the education we have today Nidas Adhyapane. There's also an argument to be made that you can't call it Nomile Adhyapane either, because although the public education system itself is nominally free, and then there is a lot of support in terms of textbooks and uniforms and things, practically there is a huge amount of expenditure on tuition classes, and without that expense you can't make it work almost. It's like for very few exceptions. So you could argue that it's not free of charge, it's not nomile anymore as well.
Yes. So the key point that you made over there was the freedom, and it's generally the freedom for the student that we're talking about, the child protection here. The freedom, the capacity for a child to develop the creativity and the curiosity, and with the system that you're following now, the not so conventional type of education that you're following, given the fact that you yourself was brought up with the conventional education as I, where do you find yourself, or what kind of instance has it been the most challenging in terms of managing behaviors of children, which is one of the things that we find in the classroom daily routines, behavior, mismanagement, misbehaviors of children, as they call it, which results in punishments and things. So for you, what has been the most challenging in this non-conventional education?
Well, if you were to look at challenges in managing children's behavior, I think that frame of reference itself is actually the problem, because if we consider that it's the role of the adults to manage how children behave, it's going to result in a power struggle, especially when you have like a teacher-student ratio of 1 to 25, 1 to 35, whatever it is. And you can't have that sort of thing working out unless you resort to some form of punishment to control them. So you mentioned curiosity and creativity, and for us, curiosity is one of the most powerful drivers for any sort of learning, because we are deeply, deeply curious animals. We want to know why things work, we want to know how we can change things so we can change the outcome, and this is why a young child will ask and keep on asking question after question. And so that's a drive for learning. So if the child is asking questions, we can be available to support them. Either if we know the answer, we can give it, otherwise we can help them find the answer, which these days is so easy with all the access to information. And so we allow the children to pursue individually or collectively whatever things they're curious about, whatever things they're interested in. So you don't have a situation where somebody is forced to study something that they don't have an interest in studying at that time. And that really eliminates a lot of potential for conflict. But also, it doesn't mean that conflicts don't arise, right? There's some resource that two people want to use by themselves at the same time, so there is some sort of conflict. But it's not then our job to be the arbiters of that and decide what should happen, but it's rather the community, because we call this a democratic system of education. The community has to decide, okay, what is your need, what is the other person's need, and how can we manage this in a way that needs are met.
By community, you mean the children themselves?
Children and any adults in that space,
Okay.
yes. So we are also members of that community. If things come down to a vote, then children can vote and we can vote, but our vote is not more powerful than a children's vote in that sense.
So in terms of the non-conventional education that you're following at the moment, so there is nothing called misbehaviors. It is the behavior of the child that you respond to rather than the child responding to your behavior.
Well, I'm not sure that I would say that there isn't misbehavior, but like for example, if you are trying to concentrate on something and you need some quiet, and I'm making a noise and I'm disturbing you, you can speak up and say that this person is disturbing me, which you could maybe define as a sort of something that at that point seems unacceptable. So then we need to see, okay, you have a need for some quiet, I have a need to do something that is maybe making some noise. So is there some way that these needs can be met? Is there a way for one of us to move away or something like that? So we may not maybe label it as misbehaviors, but those sort of differences or conflicts certainly do arise.
Okay, so the point I'm trying to get at is, in a conventional ordinary school, you have these scenarios where there are maybe, because of the vast number of children, or the needs are very different from each child to another, but we often hear this excuse, both from parents as well as educators, stubborn children, kids who don't listen to us. In Sinhala they say attara vela, and so the quickest response from an adult is to give a whack and quieten them down, or to shout and quieten them down. How would you manage a child who is consistently perhaps not listening to what you're saying?
Okay, if we take this description of a stubborn child, or even if you roll back a little bit, so any sort of behavior is really learned. Right? We are either learning it from our peers, we are learning it from our adults, our role models, what we see on media, we are learning some behavior. So if somebody is behaving in a way that we might describe as stubborn, that means they have learned this behavior from somebody. And I would say most of the time they would have learned it from adults, so either their parents or their teachers, who are insisting on having their way. And if it's okay for an adult to do that, and a child is looking at adults as the role models of, what do I want to be when I grow up, and what are some of these things that I can start doing right now. So if you see the adults who you're constantly told to respect and admire and things are being stubborn, then it's natural to expect that children will also try to be stubborn. So if we can demonstrate that as adults we can get things done without having to be stubborn about things, then that provides a different example for the children to follow. And then hopefully we would not have this issue. But the conventional education system is essentially coercive in the sense that there is a predefined syllabus that everybody has to follow, and you have to, it's defined what you have to do each year, how you're going to learn it, how you'll be tested, what is the standard. So everything has been predefined. You have to do it whether you want to or not. So in that sort of a system where, and then we say it's the schools and the teachers' responsibility that this child learns these things and passes these exams, you have to enforce it, you have to push it. So I don't know if you can really do that without insisting and forcing certain things to happen. So then I think it's very natural that children will also respond by being sticking to their guns, and then they'll end up being labeled as stubborn because there is a imbalance in the power hierarchy. The adults have the power and the children don't have power. So from our perspective, if there was a problem because, say, somebody is being stubborn, how we would look at it is that any sort of a behavior, whether it's a child or an adult, is an attempt to meet some kind of a need. So right now this child is being stubborn and it's a disruption, but we need to support this child to, let's see if we can understand what is the need that is not being met here, and how can we support this child to meet that need in a way that doesn't impact the needs or ability of the others to meet their needs. So what is it that you need, and how can we help you achieve that need? So that would be the general approach. So we would not, I think, definitely not label a child as being a stubborn child, but rather what is the need that the child is trying to meet.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the conventional education that the majority of Sri Lanka is accustomed to, and this new non-conventional way that you're approaching education, which kind of fits into the more of a Scandinavian style as well to some extent. And we always talk about having a Scandinavian type of education in Sri Lanka. What is the revolutionary things that you're exercising within your own classrooms, if I may call that?
I think there's many things that could be considered quite revolutionary compared to the conventional, but I think the key feature to look at it is, if we go back some generations, just one or two generations even, you could be fairly confident that if you went to school and you completed your O-levels, I think then it was the senior school certificate or some name like that, and you would be able to get a decent job and you could stay in that job till you had to retire, and it was fine. So you had that degree of confidence in what the education system was offering, and there was then some finite set of knowledge that you acquired. You didn't get things like a degree necessarily. You do your O-levels and it's fine. So like for my father, he completed what we would now call the O-levels. He went to a bank, he got a job, he was able to support his family. So it was okay then. But now you can't, because of the way that knowledge is exploding in the world, you can't do 11 years of schooling and then expect that you're going to have a decent life at the end of it. And how the system has responded to that is really by increasing the amount of years you have education. So for my father, it was okay to leave at O levels. Then some years later, it was okay to leave at A levels. Then it was like you need a degree, and now you have people doing their master's straight after the degree because even the degree is not enough. But the other sort of way of doing this is, rather than trying to front load everything into the person and you study and then you go out to work, can you equip them with the basics so that they can get out there into the world as adults and they are working while studying, or living while studying, because living isn't only really about working. And especially when you consider that the way the world is changing now, I don't think anybody can really predict. So my child is 7, so he's going to be an adult in 11 years, right? In 11 years' time, what is the job market going to look like, right? What are going to be the nice jobs to have? And how will we live? How will we commute? How will we interact, right? How do we prepare for those kind of things? What will our relationships be like? So we don't know what the world is going to be like in 11 years. So how can we have a syllabus now that's supposed to equip him to have a meaningful life when he's 18? I don't think we can do that when the way things are changing. So the other way to approach this is, since children are naturally curious and want to figure out things, how do we amplify that? And whatever the world will throw at him, can he find a support group that he can figure things out with? So then he doesn't need to necessarily complete a degree and complete a master's before he goes out there, but around the time he's an adult, he could just sort of enter the world, really, and whatever that he still needs to learn, he will continue to learn.
So it's more choice related, more pace related, and more in keeping with the natural development of a child, that you allow the child to make the decisions.
Yes.
To some extent.
So that, I think the choice, you could say, is on one side it's in terms of what kind of things you want to do. So I was interested very much in IT and engineering, but somebody else could be interested in architecture or art or music or any sort of human endeavor, sports, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Something that you enjoy doing and that you can make a difference to the world in. But it's also choices about how you get information, how you learn things, what is the speed at which you do things. So there's a sort of typical gender development difference where when we take like A-level results, usually girls tend to do better because they've sort of peaked in their development, and boys are a little bit behind. So then university admissions are a little bit skewed towards girls, but when it comes to university age, then the boys have caught up in their development and then they tend to do better. This is of course like very broadly speaking, but at individual level there's a lot of variation, and then you should be able to acquire the education in a way that works for you, right? So actually connecting back with something you asked before about us being products of the conventional education system. So that system works in some ways for some people. It wasn't unsuccessful for me. I did reasonably well in that system, but at a cost to certain sides of my development as well. But that doesn't mean it's going to be successful that way for everybody. So what if each child could access the education that was working for them? So if that is the conventional method, then fine. But if it's not the conventional method, then is there an opportunity for you to approach it some other way?
Quite interesting how you look at education in the 21st century, Sifaan. So congratulations and hats off to you for that. I know that's a long way to go. Whatever education system, whatever family circumstances may be, we find ourselves in a state where child abuse has become a national crisis. And we know very well that most of these children are being abused within their home environments. And that's possibly because the communication, the parent-child communication is completely broken. There is such a distance that even the children don't feel that they can trust their parents to come and tell them when there is a problem. So as a parent yourself, as a new age educationist yourself, and perhaps someone who has seen the two sides of a coin, overseas and over here, what advice can you give to our viewers on how we could improve that connection between the parent and the child?
So I would say there is a certain responsibility we have as parents towards our children, right? So we are supposed to provide for them, look after them, educate them. There are certain responsibilities. In executing those responsibilities, we could take the position of an authority figure, right? So I'm your father, you have to do what I say, and you just have to do it, right? So that's the authority role. The other approach is that if I ask for something to be done, it's done because the child trusts that I am doing this in our best interest, and that in previous times when I've asked for something, it has been successful and that's the experience he's got. So that's a trust relationship. So if you have a trust relationship, then there is no authority as such where somebody can order somebody to do something. But if you ask for something to happen and the other party is not willing, then you would need to invest time in understanding, okay, why is it that you don't want to do this? And this then works both ways. So just as much as I can ask my son to do something, he can ask me to do something. So, and if it's valid for me to say that I am busy with this right now and I will do this for you in 1 hour's time, it should also be valid for him to give that kind of answer back to me, right? Of course, if it's quickly do something for 1 minute, then I would interrupt my work to go and do it for him, and vice versa. So that sort of thing, it has to be balanced. So if we have that kind of trusted relationship, then I think children are much more comfortable to open up about issues, because they will see that something has gone wrong and I need some help to put it right, and my mother or my father or both of them will help me do that. Whereas if they feel that, oh my God, if my father finds out, I'm going to be in trouble, then you learn to hide things. You don't want to share this because you're so worried. And when it comes to
specifically, that's true, if I may interrupt. When you respond with a punishment, I think children become fearful, and that connection is definitely broken because they're so afraid of the pain, the punishment, that they withdraw even more. Am I right?
Correct. And from what I understand about grooming children for sexual abuse, that fear that if you tell your parents, then you're going to be in trouble, is something that they exploit. So I think you don't want to be in that position as a parent. And another way of looking at it is, even as adults, we mess up, right? We make mistakes, and hopefully it's not so extreme that we can't recover from it. But this is us with supposedly developed adult brain. So we should expect that children will make mistakes, will make errors of judgment, will do things that they regret. So I would want for our relationship with our child to be that when he messes up like that, and I'm sure he will, that he will choose to talk to us about it rather than somebody else. So that he has a stronger relationship with us than with his friends or other adults in his life for something like this, because we are the people he interacts with the most, so we ought to have more opportunities to build trust and to have the stronger relationship. So if we cultivate that trust, then I believe that openness will be there. And if we don't, so if we have this authority approach, then they will fulfill those connection needs with somebody else. So some friends who give them sometimes people might call this bad friends or something, but they are fulfilling the needs the child has that the child can't meet from the parents, and then that could lead to even more sort of bad decisions and things like that. So in terms of avoiding all of those things, I think the key thing is that we need to demonstrate to children that we respect them, and then they will follow our example and respect us. So if we only demand respect for us as an authority figure, it doesn't work starting there. Then they will, I don't think they will learn to trust us. So it starts by us respecting children and being able to empathize with how they see the world, which is sometimes much more, well, often much more limited than the way we see things, but we need to be able to step into their shoes and empathize with them.
Well, that's 3 key things you've said right there at the end, very valid. So you got to be the child able to trust you. So the trusting is 2 ways. The respect, the mutual respect, and finally the empathy, which is very strongly lacking in most of our communities. So thank you, Sifaan, for that very wonderful discussion, and we will hopefully dig deeper at the next conversation.
Thank you, Doctor.
Child protection is a collective social responsibility. So ask yourself first whether your child trusts you. Will they come to you if they're in trouble? Build that relationship.